Okay, so I want to do a recording and show some of the major bones of the skull and selectively take things out. And as I take things out, I'll make comments about them. First thing I want you to recognize is that this skull looks slightly different than what you're normally used to. This skull has some of the cartilage associated with the head and the neck. So if you look right here, this portion right here, the nose, has a major portion of cartilage, the nasal cartilage, and then laterally we have ear cartilage as well. So I'm going to take all the cartilage out, and I just wanted to show you that. In addition to the cartilage, I want to take some major portions of the bones out. I want to take the frontal bone out. I'm going to take the parietal bone out. And then we're going to take the occipital bone out. Before we do the occipital bone, I want to point something out to you. Now, what I've just done, if you haven't paid attention, rotated the skull, and now we're looking at the posterior portion of the skull. I'm going to look at it inferior now. Again, this is the occipital bone. You have this hole right here, this hole that I'm circling with the mouse. It's called the foramen. And so that's a big hole, and magnum means very big. The foramen magnum provides passageway for the vertebral column. So inferior to that, you have your neck and the rest of the remaining portion of the body. Superior to that, you have the skull. The brain. Now, lateral to the foramen magnum, you have a space right here, a surface called a condyle. That condyle is rounded, and it's flat here and rounded, and that provides a place of articulation with the atlas, the superiormost portion of the vertebral column. Okay, so let's take that out. Now we're going to rotate, and we're looking at this skull laterally. I'm going to start taking out some more bones. Inferior to this bone right here is the hyoid bone. I'm going to take that out. I don't have much to say about that. I talked about the temporal bone already. I'm going to take the temporal bone out. So that's the temporal bone. Oops. And I'm going to remove the mandible, the maxilla, and in addition we're going to remove the teeth. And what remains? A bunch of bones that are very small, difficult to identify, and get confusing. So this is the main point of this video here. If you look right here, now where my mouse is circling here, this is the major portion of the nose. A couple of bones that we've already identified that are easy to identify. The nasal bone right here, and then the inferior portion of that is, the central septum here. This inferior portion is called the vomer. Another bone that, so this is where the vomer was. The inferior portion of the nasal, essentially the nasal floor, is the palatine bone. And then the ethmoid bone is the superior portion of the nose now at this point. So at this point we have three bones left. We have the ethmoid bone, the sphenoid bone, and then we have paired zygomatic bones. The zygomatic bones are relatively simple, so we're going to just remove those. Okay. I almost forgot about one small bone that is in the eye socket right here, and that bone, if we go just posterior to the ethmoid bone, I'm sorry. If we go put anterior to the ethmoid bone, we have the lacrimal bone. See, I told you that these things are small and they can get confusing. So this is the lacrimal bone, and we're going to take the left lacrimal bone out now. Okay, so what do we have left? The two most confusing complex bones in our skull provide some of the floor of the brain for the brain cavity, provide lateral aspect of the skull, and provide lots of spaces and nooks and crannies. So one that's relatively simple associated with the nose is the ethmoid bone. The ethmoid bone, this is the superior portion of the skull. We're looking down on the skull. You look at the floor. At this point, this would be the roof. The floor of the brain cranial cavity. The brain will sit right here. This is just deep to the nose. Notice that you have a couple of things about the ethmoid bone here. The ethmoid bone has these circular holes, these divots that are both large and small. Then it has this rather large prominence. That prominence there is called the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone, and then these holes here are called the crista galli. Remember now, the ethmoid bone is complicated, so you can see the ethmoid bone from inside the skull if the skull were taken off, and you can also see the ethmoid bone along the nose. Let's take the ethmoid bone out, and now we have one more thing remaining called the sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone is very complicated. It has a couple of main things that we've talked about already. The sphenoid bone has this hole right here. This is the posterior portion of the eye, and this hole right here is called the superior orbital fissure. The other fissure right here, this provides just one aspect, one portion of the fissure. Right here is the inferior orbital fissure. And in between the inferior and the superior orbital fissures is a canal or a foramen called the optic foramen. The optic foramen is on it. That's the right optic foramen. If we rotate this again, sorry, looking from a superior aspect now, this is a portion of the brain cavity, so the brain would be sitting right here. Anterior to this is the ethmoid bone, where we just took out. So this portion right here is the lesser wing, or the smaller part of the sphenoid bone. So the lesser wing is small, and then the greater wing that follows all around here is the major portion of the sphenoid bone. I think I'm going to stop right here.